burden, the challenge of this whole business of Alzheimer's. And but when I think why I'm here, I don't know why you're here, but I'm here because Carrie told me that I would be auditioning for the Golden Bachelor. and so apparently that's not what's happening tonight anyway. But I'm pleased to be here with you, and I'm so glad that I had a chance to see what Sunshine is all about. So impressed with the team that's here to give compassion and understanding and love. That is so important. I can remember when I would leave Elaine with her Alzheimer's at daycare, and I would feel so sad and what was going on in my life. The only one of the things I could take comfort in, I knew that she was with people who would give her compassion and love and understanding. And what a relief that was. So to the entire team here, so thank you for what you do. Yeah, thank you. But I shared with some of you, but my first experience with Alzheimer's, was when I gave a campaign talk. This was in 1978, and it was in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So I'm giving this campaign talk, and after the talk was over, this gentleman came up to me and he pounded me. He said, "Schreiber," he said, "that ought to be the world's most god-awful speech I've ever heard in my whole life." Well, his wife was there, and she heard him, and she was so embarrassed. And she came running over. She said, "Governor," she said, "please excuse my husband. He's old and he's senile, and all he does is just repeat whatever he hears everybody else say." And before I go further, I want to just acknowledge a longtime friend. Rusty is the head of the North Star Real Estate, and if you can raise your hand over there. So I've known him. Elaine and I used to vacation up here in Door County and on Washington Island, and we would spend time together, and just always gracious, kind, and understanding. And he still owes me $50. I don't know. I bring that up. But thank you very much. Well, listen, we're here to talk about my two Elaines, and let me tell you, I'm not a book salesman, but I'm going to give you somewhat of an understanding of the progress. This is one of the very first editions that we came out with, and this is what they call self-published. And what happens is you think you have something that maybe people will benefit by, and because of that, then you do this on your own. And so this was out, and there are, believe it or not, 90,000 of these books in print. 90,000. And only 89,800 in my garage. And so then what happened was Harper read this book and a number of years ago, and they thought it was so important that they published this book to take it nationwide. And that is really quite a compliment. And when they have evaluated, this was voted one of the best Alzheimer's books of all time. I don't say this for self-grandizement. I say this because I know that the book can have an impact on people's lives. And that's what I'm really all about. I want you to know further that now we have just come out with what would be called the 8th printing. And what this is a author's signature edition, which is this book with these pictures inside with what's covered here. So anyway, if I do have any profits, it goes to Alzheimer's Support Group. If you want to buy a book, we happen to have some to sell you tonight. But I want to tell you about this book. All my books. I don't know, have you ever picked up a book and started to read it and couldn't put it down? People have told me that that's what happened with this book, because that happens, you know. And I'll tell you how that came about. 2 years ago, before the Harper people picked it up, 2 years ago, what happened was I was running short of books. These were the ones that we had. And so it's in January, and we're running short of books. So I go to the printer, I say, "Hey, we need these books as soon as possible." Well, what happened was, the printer not only got the books done on time, he got the books done ahead of time. But do you see how this is shiny? Haley, do you see that? Well, that's like a lacquer, like a varnish. what happened was he didn't let it dry sufficiently. And because he didn't let it dry sufficiently, it became sticky. And so people picked up the book and they started to read it and they wanted to put it down and they couldn't put it down. And so what happened though is, because now it's cold out, it's winter time, and people wanted to go out, they had to buy bread and milk and eggs and so forth. And so they tried to get their arm through, then they couldn't get their arm with the book, and so they had to walk around like this, which was really good advertising for the book. But by the same token, they're blaming me for 15 cases of frostbite. And whether or not it's 15 hands with frostbite or whether it's 3 hands with 5 fingers each, I don't know yet, but it is a challenge to find out what is going to be happening with this. So the book, My Two Elaines, well, that's the first Elaine is the girl that I fell in love with when I was a freshman in high school. And we dated and we went steady and we got engaged and we got married, and 4 children and 13 grandchildren, now 9 great-grandchildren. And my friend, my advisor, my companion, everything that you could ever want in a life's partner. Absolutely everything. If I would run for political office, she would be the hardest working campaigner. And if I would lose, she would never let me feel defeated. And I think of all the words that I might pass on is, yes, we may lose, but we can never allow ourselves to feel defeated. Well, the second Elaine, the same person, but the second Elaine began to appear when she was about 63, 64 years of age. And she began to get lost going to and from places she had been going to and from for the last 10 years. She was a great cook and sometimes would mess up her recipes so badly she would cry. She would come up with stories that I never heard of before. I don't know where she got it. She would back the car out of the garage and scrape the side, and that never happened before. And so that was the beginning. And so when the doctor diagnosed her, and one of the reasons I eventually wrote the book, but the doctor said 4 things that you should be doing. Numenda and Aricept, which are 2 drugs maybe to delay it, and then that you should do, and then you should have socialization and so forth. And then the 3rd thing you should have is exercise, walking, best exercise for the brain. And 4th, a glass of red wine every evening. Elaine got 4 weeks ahead with the glass of red wine and 3 weeks behind with the walking. But that was what the doctor told me, and I knew nothing more about it. And so we began on this journey. And as we're on this journey, I am a basket case in the end. I didn't really understand that I was morphing from a loving husband into being a caregiver. And there's a difference between being a loving husband and a caregiver. And so I didn't realize what was happening. And because I didn't realize what was happening, I didn't have the ability to confront it. Also, what happens with caregivers, not only do we morph into being a caregiver, but also what is happening is, well, as a side note, I had a friend who retired, everything is going good in his life. He has a heart attack and he dies. Immediate snap of a finger, gone. Well, it's tragic. But there was a funeral and people came by to express their sympathy, and there was closure. One of the things a caregiver never gets is closure. And there is also a lack of understanding that caregivers also grieve, although we don't know we're grieving. I call it unacknowledged grief. And so we have this worry and this anxiety about what's going on. We see our loved one digress a little bit every day. We think we've got the answer finally, and we wake up and it's altogether changed because it's a new day. But then in addition to that, we don't confront the fact that we are in essence going through the process of grieving. So I encourage anyone who is in a situation like this to try and uncover the kinds of emotions and feelings that are brought about naturally because of this. One of the things I learned, very important, and that is that it was so important for me to join her world. Because as long as I tried to keep her in my world, then it was tough on her and it was tough on me. Elaine, it didn't happen on a Thursday, it happened on a Friday. Elaine, it wasn't the Smiths, it was the Jones. Elaine, why did you put the car keys in the dishwasher? Elaine, I told you 5 times we're leaving at 10 o'clock. Elaine, well, what was happening is she was losing her memory, but at the same time being criticized for things she didn't know she had done. And so I was trying to keep her in my world. The important thing is for me to understand that it is me who should be joining her world. And so once I got a better understanding of that, and so an example, once she asked me, how are my parents? I said, well, they're both dead. She says, no, they're not. I said, Elaine, they're both dead. She said, they're both dead. The shock on her face when she realized she didn't say goodbye, much less attend the funeral, I promised myself I'd never put her through that again. So the next time she said, how are my parents? Oh, I said, they're well. I said, your mom likes working at church, your dad likes his sports. Oh, Elaine said, that makes me feel so happy, so happy. Therapeutic fibbing. That's what I call therapeutic fibbing, so important. I want 2 things about therapeutic fibbing. Number 1, I tried it the first year of marriage. The second point about therapeutic fibbing, and I want to be honest with you, not everyone believes me on this, but the second point of therapeutic fibbing, remember the story about Moses up on Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments? Remember that story? Not everyone believes me on this, but I was there with him, and I helped him with those tablets. I said, Mo, well, first of all, never call Moses Mo, he hates it. So I said, Moses, how are we going to get this stuff down here? Well, he said, we're going to do it together, so we moved it down, and now we're down the bottom. The 10 Commandments, if you look at the front, in Arabic Hebrew, 10 Commandments, Arabic Hebrew. And so I didn't know, I looked at that, I couldn't get any, but so I walked around, I was curious, so I went on the other side, and here, you cannot believe this, but it's actually happened. On the other side of the tablets of the 10, or the words written in Door County English, therapeutic fibbing is good. Therapeutic fibbing is advisable. Make sure you use therapeutic fibbing because it's going to make a difference in a person's life. Can you imagine that? And I'm here to report that to you. And so, as I said, not everyone believes it. So join the world of the person who now is. There's 2 things that I call the pivot. And one is certainly by the grace of God when our loved one finally enters in their own world, and no longer then the questions and the worries, and so that now they're in their own world, and I believe that is good. The other pivot, which is so very difficult, is by the caregiver, and that is to get to the point where you let go of this person who once was, so you can embrace the person who now is. That is so difficult, but also so important. So as we look at joining the world of the person who now is, one of the things that is so important is redirection. And Elaine, she wants a glass of wine, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. Elaine, you can't, it's 9 o'clock. That's not the answer. Elaine, you want red wine or white wine? Do you want it in a taller glass or in a smaller glass? Do you want to drink it with our neighbors, or should we invite your sisters over? Well, let's have a cup of coffee. Well, in other words, you cannot fight this disease head on. You cannot fight this disease head on. So as I am going through this transition of being a loving husband to a caregiver, I'm beginning to realize that we have lost out on so many moments of joy. The doctor said, remember, walking is the best exercise for the brain. I would take her for a walk every day, half an hour. Every day. For me, I was busy. Half an hour was really great. We'd walk, she'd look at that pretty bird. Come on, Elaine, look at the flower. We had to get that half an hour. So to understand that there are moments in the life of our loved one which are so special to them that we should take time and acknowledge and share that joy with them. Because that may be one of the only real joys that they get, and maybe one of the only joys that we get. But when you think about it, if Elaine and I are in Switzerland watching the Alps, what's a wonderful thing. But we could have the same thing, holding hands, watching leaves blow across the lawn, and yet our hearts will be touching. So we talked about hearts touching And we mentioned in the interview, I think. So Elaine was roughly 8 years and a half or so forth with me, and roughly 8 years and a half and so forth at assisted living memory care. So Elaine has assisted living memory care. And so I would eat lunch with her as much as possible. And so we're having lunch one day, and as we're having lunch, she looks at me and she's beginning to cry. And I said, well, why are you crying? And as I pointed out earlier, I asked her, why are you crying? Well, she said, she looked at me, I'm beginning to love you more than my husband. And so I pointed out, I didn't ask her what's wrong with your turkey husband. But what I did do is understood that it's not necessary for her to know my name in order for our hearts to touch. So I want to tell caregivers and friends of caregivers and relatives and so forth, yes, they may forget your name. And yes, it's going to be painful for the time being, but that's not what's important. The question is, did hearts touch? Now, hearts can touch by giving a hug, by holding a hand, by singing a song, by just being together, by giving a smile. That's what it's all about. 20 years ago, roughly, when Elaine was diagnosed, no real cure, no prevention. Can't cure it, can't prevent it. Today, we're sort of close, but we're still a long way to go. Still not cured, still not preventable, basically. And so, I want to mention two things about that. One of the things is, because we can't control what's happening with this disease, it is such a dire, such a terrible prognosis that could easily leave us devastated. But what we can do, we can look at it and say, hey, one thing I can do, and that's to help my loved one live their best life possible. How do we help our loved one live their best life possible? By joining their world. Can you imagine of all the things in the world that we could do to make people happy, but to be one of them to help our loved one live their best life possible? How cool is that? Well, that's really pretty neat. And so we can set then our sights on a realizable goal, on something which can be accomplished. We join their world, that helps them live their best life possible. But also what we do is caregivers have to take care of themselves. Caregivers have to understand that to ask for help is a sign you're not giving up. To ask for help is a matter of courage. We men are terrible at that. And so, for example, Elaine, it's time for Elaine to go into assisted living memory care, and I wasn't going to do it. Thank goodness for the Alzheimer's Association who helped give me guidance, went to counseling. Said, what's wrong? Well, I said, I cannot see putting Elaine into a nursing home. And the counselor says, you're not putting Elaine anyplace, you are giving her an opportunity to be who she is now. And I thought about that. And then I began to realize that my wanting to keep her home was my own pride. It was my own battle with Alzheimer's. Forget about what is best for Elaine and her future. I wasn't in that kind of mentality. But once I understood how out of sync I was with what I could and should be doing to help Elaine in her life, that made all the difference in the world. But then I found out that if I have not good sleep because I'm sleeping at the door for fear she might want to be going out at night, if I don't eat right, if I don't get enough sleep, if I don't have enough socialization, if I begin to feel more pressured, what happens is I become irrationally irritable. And that's not a good thing, either for your loved one or for someone across the counter at the grocery store or so forth. Irrational irritability. So assume hypothetically that you, speaking about the lottery, I want to talk about lottery, we're going to talk about, so assume hypothetically I win the lottery, okay? And I can afford all of us to go on a cruise in the Caribbean. Now, when I mention the lottery, I want to point out to you that every single number in the winning lottery is in this book. And so I want to have you understand it. But anyway, so I win the lottery, okay? And you've been so good coming out on a rainy night. I'm taking all of you on a ride in the Caribbean on the Gulf of America. And so now we're on the Gulf of America, and we're doing a calypso, and we're drinking rum and coke, and we're having a good time. One of you falls overboard, and we throw you a lifeline, and you grab it, and thank God you're saved. No, you're not saved. Why? Because the lifeline breaks and you drown. So Elaine, before I went to print on this, I found out had written a series of notes and journals since her diagnosis. That gave me an insight into what I was to her and how important I was, that I was her lifeline, okay? I was her lifeline. And so with being her lifeline, I tried to help her, but the lifeline was flawed. And the reason it became flawed and weak is because I gnawed at it. How did I gnaw at it? By not getting enough sleep, by not taking care of myself, by thinking I could do it all myself, by becoming irrationally irritable. And now I'm trying to help out the person who I love the most, and I can't do it because I'm flawed, because I gnawed away at that lifeline. So it's just so important for caregivers to understand, if we're gonna help our loved one live their best life possible, we also have to take care of ourselves so we can live our best life possible. Now, I mentioned, 20 years ago, Alzheimer's could not be cured, or prevented. Today, almost not so much either. There was some time when Elaine was at assisted living memory care where they actually thought she was getting better. And I'll tell you how that came about. So we're having lunch in the cafeteria again, and as we're having lunch, she begins to look at me and she begins telling me and everybody else around, everybody, how intelligent and how good looking I am. Well, anyway. So she's been how intelligent, how good looking I am. So there's a doctor and a nurse hearing this, and they heard her say, intelligent and good looking, and they looked at me and said, she's right. And so they wrote an article for the New England Medical Journal. And the article, Elaine Schreiber's getting better because she knows her husband is intelligent and good looking. There are no dummies at the New England Medical Center. They wrote back and said, you have to show 3 things you have to show someone getting better. Not just 2, but 3 things. Okay, so they sent the article back, never published. A little bit of time goes by, a couple of days, maybe a month, I don't know. So we're having lunch again, and Elaine said, how did we meet? How did we meet? Elaine, when we were freshmen in high school, I said, we sat next to each other in Latin class. I fell in love with you right away. I said, I knew I wanted you for my wife. And I said, I loved you so much that if any boy got within 50 feet of you, I bopped him on the head. And she looked at me and she said, you're a bullshitter. Well, now they have the 3 things to show that Elaine is getting better. And also, you should know that while Elaine said, you're a bullshitter, so I said, okay, Elaine, that may be true, but let's keep it between you and me. And she says, oh no, she says, everyone already knows. And so it does, one of the things, I never thought I would be here at Sunshine. Gosh, you people do a great job. And the fact that we're all here together on this rainy evening, I never thought in my wildest dreams I would be with you. Never. But that's what Alzheimer's does. It brings you into contact with people that you never have had contact before. I walk with a cane. I have found some people to be like canes. They give stability, they help you move forward, they give you confidence and so forth. And you never know when they might show. But I share with people that with, taking you to places you never thought we would be. I was elected to the Wisconsin State Senate back in 1962, way a long time ago. And one of my responsibilities as a member of the State Senate Education Committee was to go to Washington, D.C. for a meeting. If you take as 5:30 in the morning airplane out of Milwaukee, you can go to Washington, D.C., testify at your meeting, and come back the same day, which I was in the process of doing. So now it's 5 o'clock in the morning and we're boarding the plane. In front of me is this very distinguished gentleman. And as he gets on the airplane, He walks up to the flight attendant and says, look, he says, does this plane stop in Detroit? Oh, she says, absolutely. We stop in Detroit, people get off the airplane, we go on to Washington, D.C. He said, I have to get off in Detroit. She said, fine. No, he says, I have to get off in Detroit. He says, yeah. No, he says, I'm inclined to fall asleep on an airplane. If I fall asleep, I may miss getting off in Detroit, and so I have to get off. She says, okay, I'll help you. He says, do you promise? He says, she says, sir, I promise I will get you out of this airplane in Detroit. Now we land in Washington, D.C. And here this distinguished looking gentleman is in the process of getting off of the airplane. As he gets off of the airplane, he goes to the flight attendant and he berates her. I've never heard anyone yell like that before in my whole life. I felt sorry for the flight attendant. And so after the man left, I said, oh, to the flight attendant, I feel so sorry. I said, he certainly really was angry. And she said, he was angry. You should have seen the fellow I put off in Detroit. So it takes us to places we never thought we would be. But I want to share with you just a few of Elaine's notes. So as Carrie said that she's willing to share the Alzheimer's story. I don't golf. I hate golfing. I used to sail. I don't sail anymore. But I enjoy getting together to try to see if we can help caregivers learn, cope, and survive. So if you are looking for a speaker, I come relatively cheap. Just tell me it's an audition for the Golden Bachelor and I'll be there. But if you do know of someone, and also if you take the book and you like it, if you don't mind getting on Facebook and telling people about it, I would appreciate that. Again, not because I'm a book salesman, but because people have told me that the book has made a difference in their lives. And so anyway, a few of Elaine's notes, just quickly. So when she was diagnosed very early on, she wrote a letter to what she called her dear loved ones. She writes, it wasn't until a few weeks ago that I really had to say, yes, I do have Alzheimer's. I had read of signs that indicate Alzheimer's, like getting overly upset for no reason and having trouble with names and directions. But I still didn't think it was a problem for me. But in hindsight, for too long, I've been getting lost driving, having trouble keeping days straight, and difficulties with names and schedules. I still felt I could handle it. It won't get worse. But this morning, I started reading about the mid-stage of Alzheimer's in hopes of preparing myself better, and realized I'm not very far away. That is most scary, but I have to accept it. And so the challenge that a person with Alzheimer's goes through comes really through in some of it in these notes. So she wrote that, but then on a number of occasions, and these are in the book, but I did not put that in for self-grandizement. I put in there how she would describe how important it is to her that I take care of myself. And time and again, and I want you to know that with this Alzheimer's, we had prayed together and we had cried together. But never until I read her notes did I understand how important I was as her caregiver, that I was her lifeline. And I want caregivers to understand that then as we read with what a person goes through with Alzheimer's, and then to know what kinds of challenges they have, and not the importance of, again, joining their world, but also taking care of ourselves so we're at our peak. And so there's a number of wonderful things she says about me in here. Now I want to give you a sense of what some of the challenges are that she was going through. She writes, I'm not enjoying my role anymore as Marty's wife. Because of his having concerns about my Alzheimer's, he doesn't let me be me. He doesn't let me go for a walk if I want to, or to the store alone. I used to appreciate him, what I thought was concern, but he holds me captive much too much. I'm going to try to have a second opinion, because I really don't think I have any problem. I know how to drive or walk any place I want to, but he doesn't believe me, and I hate the control he has placed on me, and I don't even think I have Alzheimer's per se. And so I think about that, and then I think about the number of times I corrected her on all of the things we should have or could have done. I think about those walks when she was trying to identify a pretty flower and I didn't have time for it. I get to the point where, please understand, as you morph from a loving husband into being a caregiver, there are many things we can do to help them live their best life possible. And again, all of that is so very doable. And so she writes, here again, I'm trying to deal with this, she is, I wish my Alzheimer's would dissipate. I'd like to be the smart wife and mother I used to be. Now I have to waste so much time just trying to figure out what I should be doing without seeming as smart as I used to be. I need to rely on Marty for everything, and I'm very lucky he continues to keep me. Life gets more difficult every day. I'm going to close with my favorite, and then we're going to do two things. We'll open up for questions and answers. And in the question and answer period, what I think I'm going to do, I'll try and repeat the question so everyone can hear it. And if you ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, I will rephrase your question. And there will be nothing that you'll be able to ask me that. And so, but then I'm also going to talk to you, and I've shared this with some of you, and you may also have heard it yourself, but talk about prayer, patience, and persistence. And so if I can find this my most favorite one, it'll just take me a second. Jenny Markham, I had it marked. So it's more towards the end of the book here. Just take me a second, I know I can find it. Oh, by the way, I'm wearing my hearing aids, which is really quite an experience. I don't know, anyone here wear hearing aids? Yeah. Which, two things we know about hearing aids. One, keep them charged, and also in the ear. All right, so this is my favorite one, and this goes back, really she wrote this in Door County, July 3rd, going back. She writes, life is good, and I plan to have it continue that way until my children tell me it's time for a nursing home or something like that. This is realistic with what my Alzheimer's book says about my future, but till then, I will try my best to be normal, whatever that means, and keep my happy side of life always continuing. I'm lucky to have such a good family and many friends to help me get through all this. And so another great day to thank the Lord and smile, smile, smile. Elaine's notes during a visit to Door County. Anyway, to all of you in Door County, thank you. So, okay, now, prayer, patience, and persistence. And someone told me this story, and it could be true, but this lady had this parrot, and all this parrot knew was Polly wants a party, Polly wants a party. She's expecting company from out of town. She's worried that her friends are not going to think well of her, because what lady has a parrot that only says Polly wants a party? So she's very worried about that. So she doesn't know what to do, but her friends are going to. So she bothered so much that she goes sees her priest. So she says, Father, she says, you have to help me. I've got this Polly wants a party parrot. My friends are coming. They're not going to think well of me, and then what do I do? The priest said, this is a miracle. He says, I myself have two parrots, Peter parrot and Paul parrot. He said, I had them for 7 years, and all they do is pray. They pray every minute of every hour of every day of every week of every month for 7 years they've been praying. And what we should do is take your parrot and put it in with my parrots, Peter parrot and Paul parrot, and my parrot, Peter parrot and Paul parrot, will be a good influence on your Polly parrot. And they agreed. So the lady went home to get her parrot, and they brought it over to the priest's home, and they opened up the cage, and they put the lady's and sure enough, Polly wants a party, Polly wants a party. Peter parrot looked at Paul parrot and said, our prayers have finally been answered. So anyway, thoughts, ideas, thanks for being here. I appreciate it a lot. My thanks to the Alzheimer's Association. If you can see ways to support them in one way or another, that you're doing yourself a favor, plus a lot of other people. And it's always good to be with you, so thank you. So, the books I should, up until this book, which is softcover, the manufactured retail price is $16.99. If you are from Canada, it's $21. Anyone here from Canada? If you are from Canada, you will have to pay $21, but when you become the 51st state, we will refund you that money for the difference. So, but the book is on sale for $15, including sales tax if you don't tell Governor Evers. And by the way, Kathy Evers has gone out of her way to try and make the state communities more dementia aware, and she really has led in that regard. And so this book, as I said, it would be $15. We were selling this book, this one here, they wanted $27.99. And there's more in this book than there is in this book, but this book has hardcover, so, but you can buy this book for $20 if you wanna buy it. If you're from Canada, $34.99, and so, picture. Okay, anyway, enough of that book, so. Thoughts, ideas, questions, anything? Yes?
What Carrie was saying before was, there's, some things are common for, persons growing older, but what affirmations did you finally get that led you to go to a doctor and get a diagnosis? Was it just the forgetting things? Was it some other people maybe saying something?
Yes. So it was really diagnosed first initially by our general practice doctor, by our family doctor. And we loved ones probably are not as aware of things as we could or should be, and I wasn't so. And so he said, to me, he said, I think you should get Elaine tested. And so we went over to Frater Hospital, and Dr. Antuano was the psychiatrist there, and he gave what we talk about in the book, the mini test. And what day is it? Here's a blank clock, draw 2 o'clock, who's president of the United States? And Elaine didn't do well. 30 is about the cutoff point. If you're below 30, you're showing signs, and Elaine was like at about a 27 when she was first diagnosed in that area. Well, then I began to get an understanding because things were failing. As I said, she, the getting lost and scraping the side of the car and the constant questions about things and so on. So that's how it went. But please make sure you get a good diagnosis, because dementia, you said, Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, but you can get dementia by getting medications mixed up, by depressions, by an operable brain tumor, and so many things that you owe it to yourself to get the proper diagnosis. Well, yes?
One thing I continue to regale in your story was the transition from an adult day center to the facility where she would stay the remainder of her life, and how so many of our small communities, rural communities, such as Door County, unfortunately doesn't have that type of transition. What advice would you get to community members to ask for something like that within a region? Because again, it sounded like the best case scenario that she was in an adult day center, and then she was able to gradually go into, did you stay overnight a couple nights, etc. But to have a facility like that to transition, how would you approach your representatives for that type of support for a brick and mortar facility like that?
Well, 2 things. I do not know of too many government-run facilities. Being was at the Lutheran Home, which was nonprofit, and many of them nonprofit. But you have individual ones, like the name that comes to my mind, which they advertise a lot, of Zura, which is assisted living and so forth. So I think, and what I have seen across the country when I give my talks, this whole area of assisted living memory care is expanding, and I just couldn't believe how much that's grown. So so if you've got okay, someone else is gonna help me with this answer too. Among the things I would say though is, check with the Chamber of Commerce, check with the medical, if you have a medical association and so forth, so there can be some kind of deepened awareness of the need for that kind of facility here in this area to interest a it could be a private company or to, interest a nonprofit to come in, and maybe establish, I don't know what assisted living facilities you have here, and I don't know where they're located and so forth, but and probably would be a good thing too, to convince the county board to do an assessment or a study, if they haven't done so yet, to find out what is the availability. And we were talking earlier, Door County is a lot of us older people, and, we come up here a couple years ago when property was cheaper. So, now it's more expensive. So, I don't know, did that sort of answer the question? Anyone want to add to that, please? Don't hesitate. Maybe Sunshine wants to get into assisted living memory care. So.
What do you think, boss?
Well, you're certainly very accurate about the demographics in Door County. I was recently doing some studying on that, and I don't know if you're aware of this, I was not. Wisconsin on average, I believe, is around 39% of the population is 60 or older. But in Door County, any guesses on what that percentage is?
70.
It's in the 60 percentile. It's like, wow, that's a big jump. And then even the 39% is high in comparison to national. But yeah, Door County definitely has a demographic that is unique in the state and somewhat unique in the region as well. So and with that, I think I'm new at Sunshine Resources, but one of the things I can say is and I'm looking and discerning to understand directionally where can Sunshine Resources go to be more relevant and more helpful in the community. Certainly the day services is viable. We're also looking at, we need to expand facilities so that we can receive more for the day services. Beyond that, this is an ongoing dialogue. It's also a dialogue with our partners in the area. As we were just at United Way last night, and I was so impressed with the strategic partners list there. Unfortunately, we're just one of many, but I think through partnership and continued communication and collaboration to really understand the growing needs of Door County, and also it's not going to be just one entity or one organization that can serve this. It's going to have to be multiples coming together. So, and I'd love this type of venue for that. So the conversation is an open one as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
I know, Sergeant, I visit assisted living and nursing homes, and dementia, knowing where they are and not, like, there's no separate or extra care, it seems.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah, there's,
There is no, there are really no, if I can call myself assisted living memory care, no matter what I provide. And, that's also a challenge too, because you expect that, but you don't get it because there's no standards to judge it by. So, yes?
Yeah, just to add on to that a bit, so that's something we were just talking about, when we were in Madison for Advocacy Day a couple weeks ago, the fact that there aren't actually any, like, guidelines for calling yourself a memory care facility. There's not required training for your staff or any of that. So that's something that we've been talking to legislators about, trying to really get something in place so that there are certain requirements that these facilities have to have in order to be labeled as memory care.
And I think the fact that you've experienced that shows how important her question was about we need more facilities, because there may be no other place for it. And
like the general population, they have like stop signs across their door to keep the dementia patients from entering their room.
That's assuming they understand and.
Well, they don't.
yeah.
And then, like, the regular patients get agitated and lash out at them because they're not educated on what's happening either. It's just like, get out of my room and put that back and get out of my chair. And if you don't have staff right there, then that person is just like going to the next room or, but since we walk all over, we see a lot of that.
My goodness, when I think of that, and I think Elaine, as she would roam and go into other, oh my gosh. Is that in the community, that place?
That's every place.
Oh, no.
Like, there's no separate place
my.
for the
Yeah.
dementia patients. So in every place we go to, they're mixed with the regular patients.
Yeah.
So it's kinda like the regular patients are really agitated and then